Watch right now on the Front News Project. The Ukrainian Tomahawk, the new Flamingo missile, can reach Moscow. Russian military facilities in Crimea are also in the crosshairs. Russian soldiers are shooting at each other. A new money-making scheme by the 83rd Air Assault Brigade. And also hellish shelling of Kharkiv and Lviv. Dozens killed, including children. Fiery, intense, and blazing footage from the front lines. Watch right now.
The fourth year of the full-scale war that Putin's Russia started on Ukrainian soil. The armed forces of Ukraine continue to heroically defend not only their homeland, but the entire civilized world from the aggression of Kremlin war criminals. Greetings, this is Front News. I'm Volodymyr Timoshenko. In the next 30 minutes, you'll get the truth about the war, uncovered by our journalists from the hottest combat zones. So are you ready? Then let's begin. And we'll start right away with exclusive material. Ukraine will soon begin serial production of the Flamingo cruise missiles with a range of up to 3,000 kilometers. This new missile has a warhead twice as powerful as the legendary American Tomahawk missiles. And considering the range of this weapon, the enemy is in for a very tough time. More details about this new, very unpleasant surprise for Putin's army. Let's watch.
A warhead weighing a ton and a flight range well over 1,000 kilometers. Ukrainian photographer Yefrem Lukatsky, who works with the Associated Press, has published photos of the new Ukrainian long-range missile Flamingo.
Ukrainian-made Flamingo missiles with a range of over 3,000 kilometers, which have entered serial production, can be seen in the workshop of one of the country's leading defense companies, Firepoint, at an undisclosed location in Ukraine.
The caption under the photo states that it was taken on August 14th in the workshop of the defense company Firepoint. The photo shows the missiles in the workshop already prepared for shipment. It appears that the Flamingo may already be in serial production. Ukrainian official sources in the missile sector have long hinted that the Ukrainian defense industry is preparing a long-range surprise for the Russians. And apparently the Flamingo is exactly the surprise that was being talked about. According to military analysts, the missile is very simple to produce, and that's exactly what Ukraine needs right now.
This is excellent news. The missile is indeed simple. It can't be compared to something like the Storm Shadow Scalp and so on. But in this case, we don't need a very complex guidance system. More modern American or British missiles have a visual guidance system, which can use infrared imaging to home in, even when various countermeasures are deployed. In this case, we don't need that. Pavel Narozhny, military expert.
All known facts indicate that the so-called Flamingo is actually the already known FP5 cruise missile from Millennium Group. The specifications, appearance of the missiles, as well as their descriptions are identical.
The capability to produce more than 50 missiles of this type per month. Such a production rate is achieved through an economic approach where, for the sake of mass production, complex design features like containerized launch and folding wings had to be sacrificed. The price for this is a longer pre-launch preparation, which takes at least 20 to 40 minutes. Nevertheless, given the capabilities of the FP5, this is quite to be expected. The company also stated that the missile uses satellite navigation resistant to electronic warfare, combined with an inertial guidance system, according to Defense Express.
The warhead of the Flamingo is a single type. It's twice as powerful as the American Tomahawk. And most importantly, it is designed for mass production. Russia systematically tries to cripple the Ukrainian defense industry, and Ukraine needs to act in the same way, focusing on destroying the Russian military-industrial complex.
And it is enormous in size, and we see that most of these factories can be hit with cheap drones that fly not at 1,000 kilometers per hour like this missile, but at a speed of 200 to 250 kilometers per hour. So right now we need a large number of inexpensive means that can effectively destroy the Russian economy and military-industrial complex. And this missile is capable of doing just that. Pavel Narozhny, military expert.
There have been no official statements from Kyiv about the new long-range Flamingo missile, and in this case, most likely everyone will simply see the results of the Flamingo strike on Russian military factories.
And now, let's discuss a truly astonishing and rather disturbing new money-making scheme that has reportedly emerged within the ranks of the Russian army. It appears that soldiers are engaging in a highly unusual practice. They intentionally shoot at each other by mutual agreement, subsequently receiving substantial sums in compensation and injury benefits. This entire, deeply concerning situation revolves around the so-called elite 83rd Air Assault Brigade, a unit that is supposed to uphold the highest standards of military conduct and discipline. The cost of the scheme, by the most conservative estimates, is 200 million rubles. So what is actually going on in these not-so-elite units? Let's take a look at the inventive money-making scheme of Russia's so-called heroes of the so-called special military operation.
Profiting from self-inflicted wounds. The Russian Investigative Committee has uncovered a large-scale scam in the 83rd Separate Guards Air Assault Brigade. It turned out that the much-vaunted Russian paratroopers were shooting each other for the sake of extra leave payments and even state awards. The investigation has already identified the names of 35 servicemen who took part in this military performance, which cost the budget about 200 million rubles. One of the brigade's assault troops gave up the scheme. The first to come under investigation was the head of the Special Operations Group of the 83rd Brigade, Konstantin Frolov, known by the call sign Executioner.
For me, since childhood, duty and honor were never just empty words. I always wanted to be a soldier, and I became one.
Konstantin Frolov, the son of a former deputy head of Roscosmos. Ironically, Russian propaganda spared no effort in making him a hero of the so-called special military operation. Videos featuring the head of the Special Operations Group were circulated by both pro-military channels and the Kremlin's mouthpiece, Channel 1.
The enemy knows him by the call sign Executioner. To his own, he is the commander, the old man, the brother, the senior of the sniper group in one of the airborne forces units. He just returned from Avdiivka, where he was wounded for the 7th time. A fragment flew under his body armor and nearly reached his heart. He refused rehabilitation and leave and returned to duty. He says his officer's honor compels him to act this way.
In reality, it turned out that even Baron Munchausen himself would envy Frolov's tall tales. Everything the journalists poured into the viewers' ears was a lie.
The documents regarding the extension of Lieutenant Colonel Frolov's arrest state that during his service in the Special Military Operations Zone, he sustained 4 injuries. The defendant himself wears insignia indicating 5 minor and 2 serious wounds. However, thanks to testimonies and expert examinations, it was established that the injuries were not sustained in combat conditions. Later, the serviceman himself admitted that at his own request, his fellow soldiers shot at him, aiming so as not to hit any vital organs. All of this was done in order to receive payments amounting to 3 million rubles. The awards, as the investigation now believes, were given to Konstantin Frolov illegally.
Amusingly, when investigators started to unravel the story, it turned out that the heroic deeds Frolov so generously shared with grateful propagandists were nothing but ordinary lies. For example, the 4th daughter, the adopted one supposedly saved by Frolov, and so enthusiastically described by the correspondent in the TV report, does not actually exist.
We were on a mission there, we got hit, and a house nearby was hit too. A girl was badly wounded there. I picked her up and carried her. And then she said to me, "Uncle Savior, is that your blood?" I looked and saw I was covered in blood. And when I brought her to the medics, I immediately passed out.
During the investigation, Konstantin Frolov also turned in another accomplice, Guards Colonel Artem Gorodilov, commander of the 83rd Brigade. By the way, he was promoted after commanding one of the units in Bucha at the start of the Russian invasion.
The main things are, well, willpower, courage, and character. Honor is more valuable than life.
Gorodilov is also accused of large-scale fraud. It turned out that in his position, he also used his wits. He quickly figured out how to get rich and eagerly helped self-inflicted wound cases receive payouts and awards. Artem Gorodilov also exposed his accomplices and admitted his guilt. The defendants in the case tried to return to the so-called Special Military Operations Zone instead of staying behind bars, but so far without success. In the near future, the Lugansk Garrison Military Court will consider the case on its merits and deliver a verdict.
And now an analysis of the operational situation on the Kupiansk and Lyman fronts. The enemy army's military terror continues. In the Kupiansk direction, our soldiers successfully stopped 5 enemy offensive actions in the areas of Golubovka, Yampol, and Kupiansk. In the Lyman direction, there were 13 combat clashes near the settlements of Karpovka, Zelenaya Dolina, Kolodyazy, and Dibrova. 7 people were killed, including 2 children, and another 24 were injured. In Kharkiv, emergency rescue operations have been completed in a 5-story building after yet another brutal Russian attack. Kremlin war criminals struck Kharkiv late in the evening with a ballistic missile. Later that night, the city was also attacked by strike UAVs. Hits were recorded in the industrial district of the city, specifically on that very residential apartment building. All the details are in the report from the scene by TSN correspondent Yulia Boyko.
This is the industrial district of Kharkiv, which the Russians attacked with warheads at dawn. All 5 struck the residential apartment building. The fire engulfed several floors in 2 entrances. The building's floors were destroyed, and part of the structure collapsed. Rescuers are clearing the rubble. They say it's a miracle that most of the residents managed to escape.
I'm a mother. My son and daughter-in-law live in that building. I was so worried. I was watching online. I saw their building. How do you think it feels for me to see that? Their building is on fire? I kept thinking, where are they? And now I just feel empty inside. What does it mean to lose your home in times like these? I was woken up by the sound of warheads flying overhead. I could just hear them flying. Then I heard an explosion and everything started falling on me, and that was it. After that, we ran away.
About 24 people were injured. The bodies of the dead were pulled from the rubble. Among them were a 1.5-year-old girl and a 16-year-old boy. Preliminary reports say they were siblings, a brother and sister, and their mother, father, and grandmother also died. DNA testing of the bodies is currently underway.
Along with Kharkiv and the region,
Today has been declared a day of mourning in Kharkiv and the region, because as a result of a strike by at least 4 drones on a 5-story building in the industrial district of Kharkiv, 7 people were killed, including 2 children. The Shahed drones hit the roof of the building, and of course there was significant destruction, making survival, let's say, extremely difficult.
And before the drones struck Kharkiv, the enemy launched a ballistic missile. The missile fell near residential apartment buildings. There were no fatalities, but 11 people sustained minor injuries.
And now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the much-suffering Pokrovsk front. The Russian world continues here as well to destroy, kill, and maim. On the Pokrovsk front, clashes of varying intensity broke out 24 times over the course of the day near the settlements of Nikanorivka, Novoekonomichne, Mykolaivka, Rodinske, Mirolyubivka, Krasny Lyman, Promin, Pokrovsk, Zverevo, Novopavlivka, Muravka, Novoukrajinka, Zatyshok, Kotline, and Udachne. One battle is still ongoing. Yes, Putin's Russia continues its brutal bombings of Ukraine. Most recently, the Russian Federation launched several missile strikes on an American enterprise in Zakarpattia. Meanwhile, Gur fighters destroyed a boat with occupiers near Zhelezny port. We will show you this footage soon. And furthermore, Belarus plans to deepen its cooperation with Iran in all areas, including, of course, the military sphere. Lukashenko is now openly saying this. And China is preparing to showcase its latest weaponry at a parade. Why now, and what kind of weapons will be demonstrated? More on this coming up.
Ukraine has repelled one of the largest attacks. The Russian occupiers launched 574 Shahed drones and other decoy drones, as well as 40 missiles of various types. The west, center, and north were under enemy fire. In Lviv, dozens of houses, windows, and roofs were damaged by the blast wave. There are casualties. As a result of Russian strikes on Mukachevo in the Zakarpattia region, an American factory producing electrical products was damaged. At least 15 people were injured. But it was also a restless night in Russia. The occupation authorities reported drone attacks in several regions. An energy facility was damaged. Several villages in the Voronezh region were left without power. A fire is also raging at the Novoshakhtinsk oil refinery. And things are also heating up for the occupiers on the front line. Ukrainian intelligence carried out a unique attack near Zhelezny port. A drone with a laser designator guided a missile to the enemy's boat, destroying it along with the entire crew. Also in the Dobropilya direction, the defense forces of Ukraine continue to carry out stabilization measures. As a result of the active actions of Ukrainian soldiers, the enemy is suffering significant losses in manpower, equipment, and weaponry.
Thanks to the successful actions of the defense forces of Ukraine in this direction, 6 settlements have been deoccupied, and the possibility of further breakthroughs by Russian occupation forces toward Dobropilya and consequently the administrative border with Dnipropetrovsk region has been minimized.
But while the defense forces are destroying the enemy, the Netherlands is transferring 2 Patriot air defense systems and 300 military personnel to Poland to protect NATO's logistics center for Ukraine. The EU is also urging Trump to deploy fighter jets in Europe. In particular, they are discussing the deployment of American F-35 fighter jets in Romania.
Against the backdrop of the latest provocations by the Russian Federation, namely the violation of Polish airspace by a Geran-2 attack drone, the violation of Lithuanian airspace by a Gerbera drone simulator, and accordingly the violation of Estonia's territorial waters, there is talk of strengthening air defense systems. The components of these air defense systems include the F-16 and F-35, with the aim of preventing similar provocations from the Russian Federation.
Meanwhile, the self-proclaimed president of Belarus has announced his readiness to cooperate with Iran across a wide range of areas, including the military sphere. It's been a while since the mustachioed one appeared in the media space, so he decided to make a splash.
Regarding Lukashenko's attempt to diversify dependencies away from the Russian Federation and accordingly the People's Republic of China in terms of the possible supply of petroleum products from Iran to the territory of the Republic of Belarus for the needs of Belarusian oil refineries, as well as accordingly the possibility of producing Iranian drones directly on the territory of the Republic of Belarus. In other words, this is yet another attempt by Lukashenko, as the first Ukrainian president used to say, to walk between the raindrops, to maneuver between the interests of the United States, the People's Republic of China, and accordingly the Russian Federation.
While Lukashenko is only just beginning to establish military ties, China is preparing to showcase its latest weaponry at the parade marking the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, which will take place on September 3rd.
Beijing is raising the stakes both politically and militarily. It is no coincidence that the satellite of the People's Republic of China, the Russian Federation, made a statement about China's role in the so-called settlement of the Ukrainian issue, as the Russian side presents it. In other words, this is about strengthening the influence of the People's Republic of China on the international stage.
Following China, North Korea is also rattling its sabers. The North Korean leader plans to increase the nuclear arsenal in response to joint military exercises by the US and South Korea.
First and foremost, this is not so much a conflict between North Korea and South Korea as it is a conflict between North Korea and the United States. North Korea is trying to escalate the situation on the Korean peninsula. This stance by North Korea is supported by both the People's Republic of China and accordingly the Russian Federation.
And now we move to the Novopavlivka sector of the front. The enemy army is up to its usual tricks here as well. In the Novopavlivka direction, the aggressor attempted to advance 8 times in the areas of the settlements of Zelenopol, Tolsto, Lesno, Olgovsko, and towards the settlements of Kamyshevaha and Filia. 4 clashes are still ongoing. And it was also a very difficult week for Western Ukraine. 1 person was killed and at least 3 were injured as a result of the massive attack on Lviv. The enemy struck the city with warheads and missiles. Dozens of houses were damaged by the blast wave, and all emergency services are at work. TSN correspondent Marichka Kuzik visited the scene of the bloody events and will tell you everything in detail.
Explosions one after another. That's what the night was like on Olena Stepanivna Street. The residents recall. Since early morning, people have been clearing the debris, taping up shattered windows, and counting the new damage. This street has come under heavy shelling 3 times in a year. Just a month ago, there was another strike here. At that time, 6 people sought medical help. They say this night was no less terrifying.
Since this isn't the first time there's been an alert, we're terrified and immediately go to the shelter as soon as it starts. All our things are ready and we head straight to the basement. That's why we were there at the moment of the strike. And as for the situation with the strikes, well, today was truly frightening. Of the damaged property, almost all our windows were blown out. There are also cracks in the main walls of our house.
We were in the bomb shelter. The explosions were, of course, powerful, very powerful. The blasts were so strong that even the bomb shelter was shaking. Later, a bit after, they started hitting from the other side. But it was so terrifying, especially when you already know what could happen. People were so scared. Some were practically lying on the floor out of fear.
Almost all the residents of this street went down to the shelter. Previous experience taught us, staying at home is dangerous. By morning, the emergency commission was already working here. Because of the destruction, residents of 11 apartments will have to be relocated. That's 17 people. They will be compensated for the rent of new housing.
26 houses were damaged. Some of them have already suffered from Russian attacks 3 times over the past year. More than 150 windows were shattered, and this time the kindergarten was hit as well. About 30 windows were broken. Today, children won't go there. We've offered an alternative. This time, administrative buildings were also affected. The court, 3 courts were damaged, as well as several businesses.
As a result of the attack, 1 person was killed and 3 others were injured. One of the injured is in serious condition.
Now, let's analyze the current situation on the Kramatorsk and Toretsk fronts. Let's be honest, these are sacred targets for Putin and his entire clique. Accordingly, the situation here is also extremely tense. In the Kramatorsk direction, the enemy attacked the defense forces' positions 3 times in the areas of Kostiantynivka and Predteshina. In the Toretsk direction, the invaders attacked 4 times in the areas of Pleshivka, Sofivka, Poltavka, and Toretsk. In more than 1,000 days of war, the occupying army has captured less than 1% of Ukrainian territory. This is the statistic provided by Commander-in-Chief Syrsky. This completely refutes the Kremlin's claims of major Russian successes on the front. After all, the main seizure of Ukrainian land by the aggressor country's army was achieved only in the first days of the full-scale invasion, after which it has essentially been stuck in place, as the numbers relentlessly show. All the details are coming up in our report.
Oh yes, Sarmatov.
It is the 1273rd day of the large-scale Russian-Ukrainian war. Almost 3.5 years of daily battles, artillery shelling, drone attacks, and thousands of casualties. But the result, if you look at the map of hostilities, speaks for itself. Moscow, which once boasted it would take Kiev in 72 hours, has, after 1,010 days of bloody fighting, captured less than 1% of Ukrainian territory. These are the conclusions reached by deep state analysts.
Starting from November 12, 2022, the occupied area amounted to 108,651 square kilometers. As of today, it is 114,493 square kilometers. The enemy has occupied 5,142 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. This amounts to 0.96% of the total area of the Ukrainian state within its internationally recognized borders. Deep state.
The Russians did indeed achieve significant operational successes, but that was in the first weeks of the invasion, when Ukraine was physically unprepared to face what was once the world's second largest army, which was simultaneously pushing forward on all fronts. In those days, the enemy managed to capture Kherson, Mariupol, and parts of the Kyiv, Chernihiv, and Sumy regions.
Everyone realized that they needed to start digging in right away. At the very least, after losing the Kharkiv region, the Russian Federation clearly understood that they couldn't secure victory on the move, well, from their side. If you want to hold your ground, you have to dig in. And all this digging in, all these positions, they leveled out all the major problems that existed at the start of the war. At first, Russia broke through our defenses in a massive way. Then Ukraine pushed the Russian Federation back, and after that, everyone shifted to more or less positional fighting. Dugouts, trenches, forests, tree lines. And that's how the fighting is conducted.
But subsequent counter-offensives by the Ukrainian armed forces pushed the occupiers back by dozens of kilometers, turning the tide of the war. Since November 12, 2022, the front has stabilized. Russia is still trying to advance now, but not on such a large scale. The enemy is storming the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces, hoping to grab at least a little Ukrainian land. Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Kupiansk, Chasov Yar, Rabotino. Thousands of attempts to storm the trenches, but the progress is minimal, sometimes 300, sometimes 500 meters. Hundreds of thousands of Russian troops were lost, but the strategic picture remained almost unchanged. Now the enemy is conducting mainly local offensive actions, pressure, attrition, destruction of infantry and equipment. However, the Russian dictator is unable to seize significant territories.
Despite those losses, and his losses are constantly growing, every kilometer and every position he captures costs him more and more killed and wounded each time. The statistics bear this out. First, their rate of advance has slowed down significantly. Second, their level of losses is extremely high, yet they persistently try to achieve the goals they have set for themselves.
They lack resources, they lack strength, they lack capabilities, all those things they boasted about so much before the war turned out to be nothing. Why has there been a wave of generals being dismissed in the Russian Federation? This is dictator Putin's personal revenge against all the military generals who for many years convinced him that our weapons had no equal, that everything was prepared, everything was great. But as it turned out of this million-strong army, only about 170,000 people were actually ready to fight at the very start of the war. That's it. The rest were not ready. There was no proper communication, no equipment, not enough ammunition. None of that was there. Everything had been sold off, everything had been stolen. And now this massive revenge, this huge punitive machine that is punishing the generals for this deception, once again shows that the Russian military machine is, for the most part, just a puff of smoke. Yes, there are people, yes, there are determined allies, Iran and North Korea. But the Russian Federation itself cannot cope with Ukraine.
Ukraine is already definitely the winner in this war. Even under conditions of shell shortages and the aggressor country's superiority in manpower and aviation, the Ukrainian defense remains resilient. The successes of the Russians are far less than what Kremlin propagandists claim. Their soldiers are being wiped out on the front lines by the tens of thousands. Their equipment burns on the battlefields, and the goals of the aggressor's army are collapsing under the blows of the Ukrainian army.
That's all for today. But very soon on Front News, there will be new, unique reports from our journalists in the hottest spots of the war, gathered so that you know the truth. This was Volodymyr Tymoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.